Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 61. Simorgh, Bird of Sovereignty. Simorgh is a link 3 that requires 2+ monsters including a winged beast. It is a relevant effect to, in the end phase, summon a winged beast from deck whose level is less than or equal to the amount of unused spell and trap zones. Also, it and any winged beasts it points to are untargetable. So why did it get banned? Simorgh was a powerful part of the bird up variant of Tri-Brigade. It can easily be cheated out by the Tri-Brigades and would most often be used to summon Apex Avian as an Omni-Negate or Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds. Barrier Statue prevents both players from summoning non-wind monsters, and since most decks aren't wind, it was just a smaller Vanity's ruler. Konami would eventually ban Simorgh over the Barrier Statue either because they deemed it too risky to leave Simorgh legal or they didn't want to hit Flu. Could this card come back?
Yes.
This card is powerful for sure, but as we've seen with Denglong, playing a brick in the deck for an Omni-Negate just isn't worth it anymore. Since Barrier Statue is banned, you'd have to only play Apex Avian, which is strong, but not necessarily that worth it. It is a bit scary that it can summon any winged beast from the deck, but the fact that it summons in the end phase and that it has to be a main deck monster is, at least in my opinion, a good enough restriction for this card to be unbanned. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 62. Graceful Charity. Graceful Charity is a normal spell that allows you to draw 3 cards then discard 2, not once per turn. So why did it get banned? This card was absolutely insane. Being able to dig 3 cards deep in old Yu-Gi-Oh was crazy, and most of the time the discard wasn't even a big deal. You could just discard monsters you didn't need so you could reborn them later or use them for chaos monsters. This card also synergized very well with Sinister Serpent and Thunder Dragon, who could act as free discards to basically let this card read draw 3. This card was all over the ban list for like 4 years. It was at 3, then 2, then 1, then banned, then back to 1, then banned again, then back to 1 again, then finally banned. Early Yu-Gi-Oh ban list or something else. Could this card come back?
Hell no.
There are a lot of cards in modern Yu-Gi-Oh that trigger when discarded to the graveyard, so not only is this card a generic draw 3, its downside is almost entirely an upside. Imagine a deck like Tyr or Dark World getting to resolve it. The game will be over immediately. This card is way too strong and should stay banned forever. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 63. Return from the Different Dimension. Return is a normal trap card that, for the cost of half your life points, can summon as many banished monsters as possible, then banish them in the end phase. So why did it get banned? Return was a very powerful card in older Yu-Gi-Oh, though it was primarily overshadowed by its older sibling Dimension Fusion. However, the release of Dark Arm Dragon would lead to Dimension Fusion being immediately banned, which led to Return taking the spotlight. This created the Dad Return deck, which was basically a control deck that would just banish a ton of dark monsters with Dad to summon them back in OTK out of nowhere. This deck would get an entire format named after it, but Return would somehow dodge a ban. It would stick around for a few more years until it stopped playing Dragon Rulers. It did the same thing as before, except now it summoned dragons. Could this card come back?
Yes.
I struggle to think of a use case for this card. It's a trap card that is really only usable on your second turn, since unless you're summoning a whole bunch of banished monsters with interruptions, this thing does nothing on the opponent's turn. This card will probably see play in Malice for a week until people realize it's bad. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 64. Curious the Lightsworn Dominion. Curious is a link 3 that requires 3 monsters with the same attribute but different types. It had the relevant effect to dump any card and summon, then mill 3. So why did it get banned? Curious would see play almost immediately as part of Grass Piles as a way to get that last combo piece into the grave, like Snow. Then once Grass got banned, it stopped playing Gemini FTK as a way to dump Block Dragon. Then once Master Diamond got limited, it stopped playing pretty much every danger deck imaginable. Dark World FTK, Thunder Dragon, Orcus, Lunalight, Dark Warrior, and finally Tearlament. Its role in almost all of these decks was to dump Cannon Soldier to FTK with Firewall Dragon or a Floodgate to set off Nightmare Griffin. It was banned as a hit to Tier, but it didn't do anything since they stopped playing it after the Shizu cards came out anyway. Could this card come back?
Hell no.
We have seen with Beatrice just how powerful dumping any card is, so releasing it would almost certainly lead to some stupid locks, especially since Griffin is still legal, so you can still use it to basically search floodgates. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 65. Elder Entity Norden. Norden is a level 4 fusion that requires 2 Synchro and or Xyz monsters as material, though it was mostly summoned off instant fusion. On summon, it reborns level 4 or lower monster, not once per turn. So why did it get banned? Norden saw play very early on in pretty much every rank 4 deck. With very little setup, a single instant fusion meant a 1 card rank 4. This was very powerful for 2015 and led the card to be played in every deck that played rank 4s, which was a lot of them. Norden would be an annoying part of the game for 2 years until it would finally be broken alongside the best rank 4 deck of its time, Zodiac. Using Fusion Substitute, Zodiac was actually able to properly summon Norden multiple times per turn to keep overlaying into Dagos or Emerald to allow them to make the standard Zodiac Endwar, but you also got to draw an extra 4 to 6 cards. This combo would eventually be what got Norden banned back in 2017. Could this card come back?
Yes.
The entire reason Norden was played was because Instant Fusion was at 3 its entire existence. Now, having Instant Fusion at 1 just means you have to play this in your extra deck, all for an unsearchable 1-of that doesn't even get your play started. Also, if you're scared of this card in Raizio, they already have Node, which is basically the same thing. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 66. Summon Sorceress. Summon Sorceress is a link 3 requiring 2+ monsters with the same type except tokens. It can summon a monster from your deck to a zone it points to that has the same type as another monster it points to. It does negate the effects of that monster, but it was hardly an issue. So why did it get banned? Summon Sorceress is one of the most powerful link monsters ever created. It's like LP on steroids. Like most link monsters released in 2018, it facilitated an FTK. This one involved looping a Assault Core and Firewall Dragon to infinitely burn the opponent with Cannon Soldier that Sork summoned. This led to the limiting of a Assault Core, which is one of the worst ban decisions in history. Sork would eventually move on to just be an enabler in combo decks. Notably, Thunder Dragon used it as basically a second LP, and Dark Warrior used it to summon Aqua Dolphin pre-connector. It's all used in a lot of other decks, but that would take too much time. This card was incredibly toxic and one of the last problem cards to be banned before Toss format. Could this card come back?
Yes.
The Summon Sorceress I just talked about could never come back, like ever. But it received an errata in both the OCG and Master that now requires you to summon a monster to your opponent's field first first, then summon the monster from deck. It also now locks you into said type. Once this errata comes out, the card will be unbanned and not played. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 67, number 16, Shockmaster. Shockmaster is a generic rank 4 requiring 3 materials. You can detach a material and declare a card type, then until the end of the next turn, your opponent cannot activate cards of that type. Fun. So why did it get banned? Shockmaster was broken on release. Even though it wasn't easy to get 3/4s onto the field, it was by no means impossible. Wind Up famously could do it from just a Magician plus Shark. Other decks like Gadgets, Fire Fist, Six Samurai, Madolche, and other just rank 4 slop also played this card. Their gameplay never revolved around summoning it, but if they ever had a slightly good hand, they would just win the game on the spot. This card requiring 3 materials meant that you could use the effect 3 times. Even in 2012, this was absurd, and Shockmaster would be banned only 11 months after release. Could this card come back? Oh, no. Not much to say aside from this. Imagine Ryzeal with this card. Ugh. Comment what card you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 68, Jin Releaser of Rituals. Jin is a level 3 fiend that can be banished from grave to be used as material for a ritual summon, and if it is used as material for a ritual summon, your opponent cannot special summon monsters while that ritual monster is on the field. So why did it get banned? The Jins were released all the way back in 2008 as a way to try and help the failing ritual mechanic. They didn't, but Releaser of Rituals would see niche play for years in any coping ritual deck. It wouldn't be until 2015 with the release of Necros, also known as the first good ritual deck, for Jin to see some real play. Most commonly it would be sent off Lavalval Chain to then be banished for the summon of Shuret, which conveniently was level 3, and boom, your opponent couldn't special summon monsters. Could this card come back? Oh, no. Jin being a level 3 monster means that it can still be dumped off Cherubini, making it so incredibly easy to access. While it wouldn't fit nicely in any current ritual deck, this card is way too abusable and too unfun to ever come back. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 69, Nightmare Mermaid. Mermaid is a Link 1 that requires a Nightmare monster as material. On summon, it discards a card to summon a Nightmare from deck. So why did it get banned? On release, its most notable attribute was that it was a second Link 1 that pointed down. So some decks would play it just so they could convert a Phoenix or Cerberus into a down arrow. This card will remain mid until the release of Orcus Nightmare. This card single-handedly took Orcus from a bricky mess to one of the most powerful deck/ends of its time. That's because any 2 monsters meant full Orcus combo. 2 monsters into Nightmare, Link for Mermaid, Mermaid summon Orcus Nightmare, make Galatea, and go off. This was so powerful that other decks with the room would slot in these cards to add an extra Omni Negate to their end board. It's very similar to what Fiendsmith is doing now. It was banned because it made getting into an Omni Negate way too easy and consistent for too many decks. Could this card come back?
Yes.
The only remotely scary part about this card is that it can summon Ibli from deck. Playing 3 bricks in the deck for an Omni just isn't good enough anymore. Ibli would probably be annoying, but 90% of decks play Links anyway, so it likely wouldn't be too bad. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 70, Nightmare Goblin. Goblin is a Link 2 requiring 2 monsters with different names. On summon, you can discard a card to get an additional normal summon to zone it points to. So why did it get banned? Like most of the Nightmares, Goblin was intended to ease the transition into Master Rule 4, in this case by being a completely generic extender. The main issue was that Goblin was only really accessible in combo-heavy decks. Since it pointed to the sides, it needed something else in the EMZ for it to do anything. Goblin would see play primarily in Goki, a powerful combo deck that just needed ways to get monsters out of the hand. Now, Goblin was not the problem card in Goki. That honor goes to Firewall and its U-linking, but it definitely wasn't fair, so it would be banned only 4 months after release. Could this card come back?
Yes.
Goblin has been incredibly power corrupted for the past 7 years. It's been banned. Decks aren't built around the normal summon anymore and have ways to extend on their own. This card just isn't needed anymore, and any deck that would theoretically want to use Goblin would not be broken because of it. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 71, Block Dragon. Block Dragon is a level 8 rock monster that can banish 3 earths from your hand and or grave to summon itself from the hand or grave, not once per turn. Also, if this is sent from the field to the grave, you can search for up to 3 rock monsters whose total level equals 8. So why did it get banned? Block Dragon is way older than you think, releasing all the way back in 2016. This card would not have a home until the release of Phantom Quartz and the Gemini FTK. Block Dragon was pivotal in the combo, but it wasn't the problem card. It saw play in 2019 in Monster Mash/Earth BA decks. This deck would use Block Dragon as extender that searched for either 2 more extenders or a Fossil Dino. Fun. Finally, we played in Adamantipator, a deck whose main 3 monsters very conveniently added up to 8 stars, meaning 1 Block Dragon activation meant full combo. Block Dragon would be banned to basically kill the deck without banning any of their cards. Could this card come back?
No.
I'm gonna get some hate for this one, but Block Dragon has the same issue that Circular and Isolde did. It turned the entire type into a 1-card deck. Even ignoring that, its power level is so much higher than the average rock monster that it would certainly just end up being another Snake Rain situation. And while they have managed to make a reptile deck apart from Snake Rain, you can't really do that with Block Dragon. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why are these Yu-Gi-Oh cards banned? Part 72, Gimmick Puppet Nightmare and Xiaogan the Spiritualist. All you need to know about these cards is that they stop the opponent from special summoning. Nightmare stops you summoning non-Gimmick Puppets if it's summoned to your field, and Xiaogan stops you as long as it's on field. So why did they get banned? I shouldn't have to explain why locking the opponent as special summoning is broken, so instead I'll just go over their usage. Xiaogan was never used for anything fun. It saw play in last turn decks and Cheese Wins, Spellbook decks to be summoned off Judgment, and lastly Voices Voice Branded, which would make Albion the Sanctifier Dragon with him plus Albaz to add a summon lock to their end board. It was also used in a hypothetical combo using a Baluku, but it was banned before she came out. Speaking of Branded, Nightmare was used as another target for Sanctifier Dragon, it being a level 8 Dark Mat that could be dumped off Grangwindle, meaning that any way to Sanctifier plus Grang would be the lock. Could these cards come back? Oh no! Xiaogan is just a stun card, so enough said. Now, Nightmare is a bit different. As a resident fan of Gimmick Puppet before the new support, believe me when I say Nightmare is awful in Gimmick Puppet. Even if Sanctifier does get banned, this card should probably stay banned just in case they make another other card that can summon it to your opponent's field. Come up with cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 73. Number 86 Heroic Champion Rongo Miniad. Rongo is a rank 4 requiring a minimum of 2 and a max of 5 warrior monsters as material. It gains effects based on how many materials it has, but since it was always made with 4 to 5, it couldn't be destroyed by battle, doubled its stats, unaffected by card effects, stopped the opponent from normal specialing monsters, and was a full board wipe. Don't worry though, it had to detach material after the opponent's turn. So why did it get banned? Rongo was released all the way back in 2015. It would see no serious play due to it taking 5 monsters and outing itself. That is until 2018. Rongo Turbo was the final evolution of Dark Warrior, arguably the most comprehensive combo deck in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Rongo would often be summoned with only 2 materials, but when paired with Gossip Shadow, it got to 5 immediately. This combo wouldn't last long as Rongo would be banned a few months after this deck saw play. Could this card come back? Oh no! It's just a Floodgate and a Towers. Not much else to say other than it's a battle immune, unaffected, kaiju immune monster that's also a full board wipe. Enough said. Come on with cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 74. Red Reboot. Reboot is a counter trap that negates the activation of a trap card, sets the negated card back down, lets the opponent set a trap from their deck, then locks them out of using traps for the rest of the turn. Also, you can pay half your life to use it from hand. Side note, due to its wording, this card can only negate trap cards used on field, so no grave effects. So why did it get banned? Reboot is a blowout card, and a really, really good one at that. It's got like 3 extra effects that really push it over the edge. Why is it a counter trap? Why is its cost to activate from hand only life points? And why does it freeze back row for the entire turn? This card saw play anytime back row decks were remotely viable, and whenever it was dropped, the game was effectively over since you would just get a free turn to do whatever you wanted. It would be limited for a few years and be a very sacky one-of, but would later be banned. Could this card come back? Oh no! Reboot is the trap decks what Shifter is the traditional decks. An unbelievably broken card that completely shuts off their deck assuming they don't draw the unsearchable out. There should be more ways of interacting with back row that aren't just blowouts. Come on with cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 75. Cold Wave. Cold Wave is a normal spell that must be activated at the start of your main phase 1. It stops both players from activating or setting spell traps until your next turn. So why did it get banned? Released all the way back in 2002, Cold Wave's main use was to secure a lethal line through any amount of back row. Your opponent's low, but they have 5 set cards. Activate Cold Wave and end the game on the spot. This card wouldn't be too overbearing for a while, but it would be limited in 2009, then later banned in 2011. Cold Wave was just a super frustrating card to play against the completely invalidated back row. In fact, it was rarely ever used for its seemingly intended purpose of locking the opponent out of spell traps on their own turn. Could this card come back? Oh no! Nowadays, the part where they can't use spell traps on their own turn is crazy. This card would just be sided in against any deck that relies on spells to function. As long as your deck isn't relying on spell traps, this card might as well have no downside. Come on with cards you want to see next. Why are these Yu-Gi-Oh cards banned? Part 76. The Pointer of the Red Lotus and Trap Dust Shoe. Both of these cards are traps that let you look at your opponent's hand and rip a card out. Pointer banishes a card into the end phase, makes you pay 2,000 life points, and reveals your hand, and Dust Shoe spins the monster as long as they had 4 cards in their hand. So why'd they get banned? Going first cards are really powerful, having full hand knowledge is really powerful, and hand ripping is really powerful. Both of these cards check all 3 boxes. They're super old, coming out in 2003 and 9 respectively, and the only reason it took them so long to be banned was because either better versions were available or the game just wasn't fast enough yet. Dust Shoe had the ability to set you back so far in tempo that you'd be stuck playing the entire game on the back foot. A Pointer is much weaker and as such didn't see play until much later, where it would be splashed into side decks as a generally good card for going first and only help facilitate unbreakable boards. Could these cards come back? Oh no! Triple Tactics Thrust alone makes these cards infinitely more toxic since now they can be easily searched and added to an end board. Being both a hand rip and full knowledge is way too powerful. Combo cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 77. Lavalval Chain. Chain is a generic rank 4 requiring 2 4s as material. It can either dump any card or place any card on top of your deck. So why did it get banned? Lavalval Chain is arguably the best rank 4 ever printed. Sending any card to the graveyard on a soft once per turn was, and still is, very strong. It saw play in pretty much everything that could feasibly make it. Infernity uses it to dump Eris for Archfiend, Shadow uses it to trigger extra effects, Dragon decks used it to dump Dragon Rulers, and even mid decks like Gemini, Battle the Boxer, and Hero made use of it. However, the deck to break it would be Necroz. They would be able to consistently make Chain to send Jin, then use the Jin to ritual summon Clausulus and lock the opponent out of summoning. It would be banned alongside Jin mostly for future-proofing reasons. Could this card come back? Oh no! It's just a better Beatrice and Curious, 2 other very banned cards. Not much else to say. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 78. Artifact Scythe. Scythe is a monster that can be placed in your spell and trap zone. If it is then destroyed in the opponent's turn, it reborns itself and locks the opponent out of their extra deck for the turn. So why did it get banned? Scythe was released alongside the other artifacts back in 2014. It saw play initially as a one-of in hat decks, mostly being summoned off Sanctum to lock Infinity or Dolce out for a turn, but it would only be played as an alternative to Moraltalk. It wouldn't see real consistent play until late 2018 with Spiral. It started a trend of siding 3 Sanctum plus a Scythe for going first. If you drew the Sanctum, the game was practically over. For the next several years, we played in almost everything. The problem was only made worse with the release of Dagda in 2020, which could set Scythe in the deck, which meant any way to pop it meant the lock. Fun. This card was survived for way too long before finally being banned in 2023. Could this card come back? Oh no! What's better than D-Barrier? A D-Barrier that's searchable off a generic link too. Scythe deserves to rot on the list forever for that one. How many cards you want to see next? Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 79. MX Saber Invoker. Invoker is a generic rank 3 that can attach to summon a level 4 Earth Warrior or Beast Warrior from deck. So why did it get banned? On release, Invoker wouldn't have a home. It didn't even have a real target to summon in its own archetype, but many players were aware of the potential this card had. Its first success came from a Dolce, where it would be used to summon Messengelato to kickstart your plays. A few years later, it would see play in Zodiac. Decks would play Tarot to make Invoker with a normal summon and effectively play 6 copies of Barrage. Zoo wouldn't be what got it banned though. Terror Top got limit for its crimes. The deck to seal the deal would be Goki. They could make it a number wave, but the goal was to use it to get the second warrior on board for Resolve. Could this card come back?
Yes.
Invoker is powerful for sure, but is just limited enough to be okay. The fact that it's a rank 3 that summons 4s means that you have to dedicate space in your main deck to play it. Comment what cards you want to see next. Why is this Yu-Gi-Oh card banned? Part 80, Giant Trunade. Trunade is a normal spell that bounces all spells and traps on field. So why did it get banned? Trunade was busted for multiple reasons. First, it was another mass back row clear, and while it wasn't permanent, it was still able to clear battle traps and swing for game. Second, it could be used to return your own cards to your hand to re-trigger their effects, like Prima or Archfiend's Oath. Finally, and this came much later, it was a form of mass back row removal that played around common protection like Stardust and Starlight Road. Trunade was very frustrating since it basically acted as Cold Wave that didn't affect you at all. You just bounced your own cards just to reset them and use them anyway. That is if the game wasn't over by then. Could this card come back?
No.
Trunade is the best of the mass back row removal. Not only can it be used to reactivate certain effects for you, it also is a way to remove all back row while ignoring any protection they might have. That being said, I could see it coming off at some point, but that time is definitely not now. Comment what cards you want to see next.